Ladies and gentlemen, here's the truth. High-value men don't chase approval. They don't stumble over their words trying to impress. They speak with intention, and sometimes it's what they don't say that makes all the difference, because words carry weight. And a man of value knows that the wrong phrase can kill attraction, trust, and respect instantly. So today I'm breaking down 7 things high-value men never say to women, and more importantly, why it works. Can I please take you out sometime? This sounds polite, sure, but it reeks of uncertainty. High-value men don't beg for time. They invite. Confidently instead, they say, let's grab a coffee Friday. You're free in the afternoon, right? Why it works? Because women crave certainty. A man who leads makes her feel safe and desired. You're out of my league. Translation, I don't believe I'm enough. A high-value man never places a woman above himself. He knows mutual value is attractive, not pedestal worship. Why it works? Because confidence is contagious. When he values himself, she does too. What do you want me to do? It sounds harmless, but this screams indecision. Women don't want another task to manage. They want a partner with a plan. High-value men take initiative. Why it works? Because it shows strength, direction, masculine energy. I'll do anything for you. Sounds romantic, right? But it's not love, it's desperation. A man who would do anything has no boundaries. High-value men give, but never lose themselves. Why it works? Because boundaries build respect. And without respect, love can't survive. My ex was crazy, red flag alert. A high-value man doesn't gossip. He's learned, he's moved on. He doesn't trash his past, he's grown from it. Why it works? Because maturity is magnetic. Emotional intelligence beats drama every time. High-value men don't need someone to complete them. They want someone to grow with. Why it works? Because women want a partner, not a project. Tell me what to say. This reveals emotional insecurity. High-value men speak from the heart, even when it's uncomfortable. Why it works? Because honesty builds intimacy, and vulnerability, when grounded, is strength. So remember this, a high-value man isn't defined by his wealth, looks, or status. He's defined by his standards, his presence, and his voice. And the man who chooses his words with purpose is the man who commands respect and keeps attraction burning for a lifetime. Speak like a man who knows his worth. Because when you do, she'll feel it. And she'll never forget it. High-value men understand one fundamental truth. Confidence is far more attractive than asking for permission. This doesn't mean being arrogant or dismissive of others' feelings. It means knowing your worth, trusting your judgment, and moving through life with clarity and purpose. A high-value man leads not just in romantic relationships, but in all areas of life. He sets the tone, he sets the pace, and he sets the direction. Women are not drawn to men who constantly seek approval, who hesitate at every step, or who second-guess their every move. They are drawn to men who exude quiet assurance, men who know what they want and are not afraid to pursue it. When a man approaches a woman and says, "Can I take you out sometime?" what he's really doing is placing the power of decision entirely in her hands while signaling his own uncertainty. It's a soft ask, a hesitant nudge. There's no leadership in it. A high-value man, on the other hand, might say, "Let's get coffee Friday at 4. You're free then, right?" It's assertive but respectful. It shows he's made a decision, he values her time, and he have a plan. The difference is subtle but powerful. It's the difference between seeking validation and extending an invitation. It's the difference between passive approval seeking and confident initiation. Confidence doesn't come from having everything figured out. It comes from being okay with the unknown, from trusting yourself to figure it out as you go. High-value men don't need to ask, "Is it okay if I lead?" They lead and adjust as needed. They understand that leadership in relationships is not about control, it's about security, direction, stability. It's about being the kind of man who brings peace into chaos, who doesn't crumble under pressure, and who doesn't rely on others to validate his every move. Women instinctively recognize this. They feel it because it creates a sense of emotional safety. When a man is sure of himself, not in a cocky way, but in a calm, grounded way, it sends a message that says, I've got this. That message is magnetic. It allows a woman to relax, to open up, to trust. She doesn't have to carry the emotional weight of the relationship. She doesn't have to lead it. She doesn't have to constantly reassure him of his worth. That's already handled. Asking for permission in every moment isn't romantic, it's exhausting. It shows fear of rejection. And while no one loves rejection, a high-value man understands that it's just part of the journey. He doesn't fear it, he accepts it, grows from it, and keeps moving. That's what makes him powerful, that's what sets him apart. Ultimately, it's not about being dominant, it's about being deliberate. Women don't want someone who controls them. They want someone who knows how to lead with respect, vision, and strength. A man who doesn't need to ask for permission because he already walks in purpose. That's real confidence. That's irresistible. A high-value man never places himself beneath anyone, not because he thinks he's better, but because he understands that real self-worth doesn't require comparison. It's rooted in knowing your value, your boundaries, and what you bring to the table. When a man says things like, "You're out of my league," or constantly tries to prove himself to a woman, what he's really doing is signaling low self-esteem. It might seem humble on the surface, but underneath, it's a form of self-abandonment. He's essentially telling her and himself that he doesn't believe is enough. And that belief shows in everything he does. Confidence doesn't mean arrogance. It's not about thinking you're better than someone else. It's about knowing that you're not less. A man who values himself doesn't need to brag or prove. He just shows up with quiet confidence. He listens more than he talks. He carries himself with dignity. He knows his opinions matter, but he doesn't need to force them. He can give attention without becoming needy. He can offer affection without expecting it back instantly. That balance, that internal stability is what makes him magnetic. When a man pedestalizes a woman, placing her above him emotionally or socially, he's handing her all the power in the relationship dynamic. He becomes the chaser, the pleaser, the one who is constantly trying to earn a spot that he already deserves just by being himself. It doesn't create attraction, it creates pressure. And pressure is not romantic. It's heavy. It feels needy. It drains the fun, the flirtation, and the excitement right out of the interaction. High-value men don't fall into that trap because they aren't seeking to impress. They're simply looking to connect. If the connection's there, great. If not, they move on without resentment or bitterness. Self-worth also creates emotional consistency. A man who knows his value doesn't ride the roller coaster of someone else's opinion. If she's warm today and cold tomorrow, he doesn't spiral. He observes, he responds, but he doesn't lose himself. That emotional steadiness is incredibly attractive. Women are drawn to men who know who they are, not just when things are going well, but when things are uncertain. In a world full of people chasing likes and approval, a man who's grounded in his own worth stands out like a lighthouse in a storm, and it's not just about romantic attraction. A man who knows his value influences how he's treated at work, with friends, with family, everywhere. People respect those who respect themselves. He doesn't chase validation. He doesn't tolerate disrespect. And he doesn't shrink to make others comfortable. That kind of presence changes a room. It commands attention without demanding it. It's not about dominance. It's about alignment. His words match his actions. His actions reflect his standards. And his standards are non-negotiable, not because he's rigid, but because he knows what honors his growth and peace of mind. At the core, self-worth is about ownership. It's owning your story, your pain, your healing, your strength, and your softness. It's the foundation from which everything else is built. Leadership, love, intimacy, purpose. When a man owns who he is and stops seeking outside permission to feel worthy, everything changes. Because self-worth doesn't just attract, it inspires. One of the most underrated traits in a man is the ability to take initiative. It's not about being controlling or overbearing. It's about having a sense of direction, purpose, and confidence in action. Women are naturally drawn to men who know what they want and who are not afraid to make the first move, plan the date, or set the tone of a conversation. Indecision, on the other hand, is a subtle repellent. It makes a woman feel like she has to carry the weight of the relationship, always guiding, always deciding, always leading, and that imbalance slowly drains attraction over time. You know, when a man constantly says things like, I don't know, what do you want to do? Or whatever you feel like, it might seem like he's being considerate or easygoing, but too much of that starts to feel like passivity. It shifts emotional labor onto the woman, forcing her to become the leader by default. And while leadership is a great quality in both partners, most women still desire a man who knows how to initiate, not because she's incapable of making decisions, but because being led by a confident man makes her feel secure, seen, and relaxed. Initiative shows up in both small and big ways. It could be something as simple as picking a restaurant without hesitation or making plans for the weekend. It could be initiating a serious conversation instead of avoiding it, or taking the lead in physical intimacy when the time is right. These gestures may not seem like much on the surface, but they communicate something powerful beneath. I am capable, I can create space, I'm not afraid to step forward. That energy makes a woman feel safe, both physically and emotionally. In contrast, when a man avoids making decisions or constantly needs reassurance before taking any step, it communicates a lack of internal certainty, and that uncertainty is contagious. It makes her second guess him. It makes her wonder if she can trust him, not just with choices about dinner, but with her emotions, her dreams, and her vulnerability. Women don't want to mother a man. They don't want to coach him through basic decisions. They want to feel like they can lean into his strength, not because she's weak, but because true strength recognizes when to lead and when to support. Initiative also reveals emotional maturity. A man who takes action without being pushed or prodded shows that he is present and invested. He doesn't sit back waiting for life to happen. He engages, he responds. He leads conversations instead of just reacting to them. He pursues goals with intention. That kind of energy is not just attractive, it's inspiring. It sets a tone in the relationship that says, we're moving forward, we're growing, and I'm here to be a part of that journey with you. At its core, taking initiative is about respect for yourself, for her, and for the potential you both share. It says, I care enough to show up with clarity. I'm not afraid of responsibility. I'm not passive in love, life, or leadership. And that's the kind of man a woman not only admires, but one she naturally wants to follow, support, and stand beside. Because initiative isn't just attractive, it's foundational to building something real. Boundaries are not walls that push people away. They are bridges that define how deeply someone can connect with you. A high-value man understands this at his core. He doesn't operate from a place of desperation or neediness, because he knows that true connection cannot be forced, chased, or begged for. Desperation is a signal that you're willing to sacrifice your dignity for attention, and nothing kills attraction faster than the scent of neediness. When a man has no boundaries, he sends the message that he will tolerate anything just to keep someone around. That doesn't inspire love, it invites disrespect. A man with boundaries knows the difference between being available and being too available. He's not afraid to say no. He doesn't fear losing someone if it means losing himself in the process. He doesn't try to win someone over with gifts, attention, or by constantly compromising who he is. Instead, he draws a clear line around what he will accept and what he won't, and he enforces it with quiet strength. He doesn't need to raise his voice or explain himself endlessly. His actions make his standards obvious. That kind of consistency creates respect, and respect, when mixed with attraction, builds the foundation of deep emotional intimacy. Without boundaries, a man becomes a people pleaser, constantly adjusting himself to fit into someone else's world, constantly trying to meet their expectations while ignoring his own. He texts too often, overcommits, apologizes for things that aren't his fault, and allows bad behavior just to avoid confrontation. This doesn't make him more lovable, it makes him invisible. Women may take what's being offered in the moment, but in the long run, they pull away. Why? Because deep down, people crave connection with someone who has a spine. who respects himself enough not to be walked over. Standards aren't about being picky or controlling. They're about having a strong sense of identity. A man with standards isn't afraid to walk away from someone who disrespects his time, his values, or his vision, not because he's cold, but because he understands the cost of allowing toxicity into his space. He would rather be alone in peace than in a relationship that drains him. That decisiveness is rare, and that rarity makes it powerful. When a man respects his own energy, he sets the tone for how others must treat him. He doesn't chase love, he attracts it by becoming someone worthy of it. When a man says, I don't tolerate dishonesty, or I value consistent communication, and he actually means it, he lives it, it creates an emotional boundary. It says to a woman, I know my worth and I value mutual respect. That's not rigid, that's attractive, because it shows that he's not entering the relationship out of loneliness or fear, but from a place of fullness. He's not looking for someone to complete him, he's looking for someone to walk beside him. Attraction isn't sustained by how much a man gives, bends, or sacrifices. It's sustained by how deeply he respects himself. Boundaries are not just protective, they're magnetic. They create a sense of mystery, strength, and depth. And in a world that often rewards superficial attention, a man who has standards stands out as a rare, grounded presence. One who doesn't chase love, but one who becomes the kind of man love naturally gravitates toward. Emotional maturity is one of the most attractive and rare qualities in a man. It's not about having all the answers or never feeling upset. It's about knowing how to respond instead of react. It's the ability to stay grounded when things get chaotic, to stay respectful even when emotions run high, and to choose growth over blame. A high-value man doesn't engage in gossip, doesn't feed drama, and doesn't seek validation through emotional outbursts. He carries himself with grace, especially when the situation could easily pull him into chaos. When a man is emotionally mature, he doesn't get threatened by a woman's emotions. He doesn't roll his eyes when she cries, doesn't shut down when she's upset, and doesn't become defensive when she expresses a need. Instead, he listens, he observes, he asks questions, he holds space for her experience without making it about himself. That level of self-control and empathy creates deep trust. It tells her, you can be real with me. You don't have to walk on eggshells. And that emotional safety is something most women crave more than charm, looks, or status. On the flip side, emotional immaturity shows up in defensiveness, deflection, passive aggression, or worse, emotional manipulation. A man who lacks emotional maturity will avoid responsibility at all costs. He'll blame her, guilt trip her, or shut her out entirely. And in doing so, he damages not only the connection, but her sense of emotional security. Drama becomes the language of the relationship, and peace becomes rare. High-value men avoid this entirely, not by pretending problems don't exist, but by refusing to let their ego run the show. A man with emotional maturity also avoids gossip, not just because it's petty, but because it's a waste of his energy. He doesn't talk about people behind their backs, doesn't revel in someone else's failure, and doesn't use others' struggles for entertainment. He knows that how he talks about others reflects how he sees the world, and ultimately himself. Instead of gossip, he chooses conversations that build, that heal, that teach. He surrounds himself with people who speak the same language: growth, responsibility, and truth. This kind of man also understands that grace isn't weakness, it's strength under control. He knows how to apologize without making excuses. He knows how to forgive without forgetting his worth. He knows when to walk away without creating a scene. He's not addicted to being right, and he doesn't see vulnerability as a threat. Instead, he sees every conflict as an opportunity to grow closer, not farther apart. And in every situation, he brings a calming presence, not because he's pretending to be okay, but because he's done the inner work to be okay. Ultimately, emotional maturity is what sustains love. Looks fade, charm wears thin, but the ability to communicate, to hold space, to disagree with respect, that never loses its power. Women don't want a man who constantly reacts. They want a man who can reflect, who can elevate the energy in the room, and who can remain consistent even when emotions get messy. That's what makes him rare. That's what makes him valuable. And that's what makes her feel safe to give her heart without fear. A complete man doesn't seek a relationship to feel whole. He brings his wholeness into the relationship. He's not looking for someone to rescue him from his insecurities, fill an emotional void, or prove his worth. He knows who he is, what he stands for, and what he brings to the table. Love is not a lifeline for him, it's a bonus. That kind of self-containment is incredibly attractive because it shifts the energy of a relationship from needy to nurturing, from anxious to grounded, from uncertain to secure. When a man seeks validation from a woman, it's easy to spot. He's constantly fishing for compliments, asking if she still loves him, needing her approval for every decision. His mood rises and falls based on her reactions. That emotional dependence puts pressure on her to become his emotional caretaker, a role that quickly turns romantic connection into emotional exhaustion. Instead of being her partner, he becomes another responsibility. That's not love, it's emotional imbalance masquerading as affection. Well, a whole man doesn't need constant reassurance because his self-worth isn't fragile. It's rooted in the way he lives, the values he upholds, and the purpose he pursues. He is already fulfilled in his identity, which allows him to enter a relationship with strength, not need. That strength isn't about ego or dominance, it's about emotional security. He doesn't fear rejection because he doesn't see it as a reflection of his value. He doesn't cling because he's not afraid of being alone. He knows that being alone is peaceful, and he'll only give that up for a connection that enhances his life. This kind of man views a woman not as a solution, but as a teammate. He doesn't idolize her or reduce her to a source of validation. He respects her as a full human being with flaws, complexities, dreams, and depth. And because he doesn't expect her to complete him, he doesn't put her on a pedestal or burden her with unrealistic expectations. He sees the relationship as a shared journey between two whole people, not one person trying to fill in the blanks of another. A man who is whole also isn't threatened by a woman's independence. He doesn't get insecure if she's successful, confident, or outspoken. He celebrates her strength because it doesn't threaten his own. He understands that a powerful woman can't diminish him. She can only amplify what's already inside him. And because he isn't trying to prove himself, he communicates with authenticity instead of performance. He can be vulnerable without feeling weak. He can love deeply without losing himself. Wholeness before romance isn't about being perfect. It's about being responsible for your own emotional health. It's doing the inner work. It's healing the wounds. It's knowing what you want, what you need, and what you can give. A complete man doesn't rush into relationships just to avoid loneliness. He chooses a partner intentionally, with clarity and peace, not out of desperation or fear. That kind of love, where two whole people meet, grow, and evolve together, is the kind that lasts. Not because it's always easy, but because it's built on the solid foundation of self-respect, not self-repair. In the end, high-value men understand that true attraction and lasting connection aren't built on words alone. They're built on actions, boundaries, and emotional maturity. They don't rely on manipulative tactics or empty promises. Instead, they stand firm in their values, respect themselves and others, and lead by example. They don't need to say the right things to win someone over because they're already showing up as the best version of themselves. Every day. A high-value man knows that the right woman will recognize his worth not because he told her, but because he lived it. So remember, gentlemen, what you say matters, but who you are speaks louder. When you respect yourself, set healthy boundaries, and cultivate emotional maturity, you'll naturally attract the kind of woman who values you for exactly who you are. And that, my friends, is the key to building a relationship that's grounded in respect, trust, and